think Jim already introduced him, but this is our Texas State Director of the Inmate BRC. He's been a big asset to us. He does a lot of audio research, and we're glad to have him up here with us. Always glad to have him around. So without further ado, this is Larry Gearman Parks.
Thanks, Darren and Jim and everybody for coming out today. This will be my first time to speak, so bear with me.
I got it.
What I put together with a little slideshow, it does have some audio in it, so I'm going to have to ask Darren, I may have to take this mic off and plug it into my computer. This so we're going to lose the mic, right? No? Okay. So let me just go through this. Carl went through some of the electronic devices with audio research. And first off, I just want to say that audio research is an effective way of collecting biological evidence. It has a name, it's called bioacoustics, and it is considered a science, so it's not just playing around with electronics. Now, if you can see this picture there, that's our leader, Darren, with a parabolic dish from Legends of the Ozarks. Pulled that off the Travel Channel. It's going to be probably this thing. You can unplug that mouse. And of course, this is brought to you by Mid-America Bigfoot. In this field of research, game cameras historically have seemed rather ineffective with catching our target. Now, bear in mind, I wrote this before something that just happened recently, Darren will share later. But it's been mentioned earlier, game cameras seem like they're spotted by this creature on the trees. And you're going to have to, you're still got to try to use one, don't give up, but you're going to have to hide them and hide the infrared light. Just don't just put it on a tree and expect one to walk in front of it. But we'll get to that later on Darren's presentation. Now you're probably going to want to ask, why record something you may not get to see it if you're not using a camera with it? And I'll tell you one good reason. It's context. Why would you just want to tell a story of something that happened when you can rehearse the moment, captured live, with all the emotion and all the context of the whole situation? It really leaves a good impact. It's a lot of fun. It may not solve any mysteries. Sometimes you can record something that's never been recorded before. You can survey the wildlife in a given area. If you get into this field, you'll find out that you're going to find coyotes and barred owls and everything. It's going to be the most common recordings besides tree frogs and crickets. I will say, if you start to decide, get back a little bit. The best time to do audio research is in the winter. Here in the South, our winters are manageable. You can have some really nice, calm nights with no wind, and all the tree frogs, or at the pond, or the crickets, everything's gone down, and that's really the best time to get some really high quality audio. And you may record something you've never heard before. For those that haven't heard that, there's CD did some recordings from the early 70s called the Sierra Sounds, and a man named Ron Moorhead and Alan Berry, they were interacting with some creatures in this high mountain, remote, private area in California, and they recorded what's been analyzed to be actually the voice of the creature speaking in its own language. I'll get more on that here in a little bit. R. Scott Nelson, as Jim mentioned earlier, he's a retired Navy cryptolinguist, 30 years experience, decoding from military and foreign language, analyzing, transcribed, everything that has to do with language and codes and different languages. And he's done some brilliant presentations on the subject the last couple of years, and he's got another book coming out. And He's the one that's come up, and just a few years ago, this Sierra Sounds that was done like in '74, he had that shown to him, and he immediately recognized that it was a language, and he's gone in there and slowed it down and found out that it was at a speed twice that of what humans are capable and outside the range of a human's capabilities. So he's made the statement already that the sounds in that recording are not possibly created by human, and then it is a language. He actually separates out words. There are sentences and conversations back and forth between more than one creature. This is just some of what I was talking about. Now, if you go to the Mid-America Bigfoot, it's got a YouTube channel called Bigfoot Field Guide TV, and some of Scott Nelson's presentations are on there from previous conferences. I recommend it highly for him going over the Sierra Sounds. Also, when you're doing recordings, you can use software to put out a spectral image where you can see the wavelengths and frequencies and compare them to other known or other unknown recordings to look for patterns and see if they're in the same hertz range and so forth. Some of my friends have done a little more of this than myself. I usually just listen to the clips. I hadn't practiced that much on the spectral end of it yet. Of course, the first piece of equipment I think Carl showed you earlier is a digital voice recorder. You can get one for as cheap as $30. I bought one that was in the $50 range. It uses 2 AAA batteries, and it lasts much longer in the field. In the wintertime, particularly where you want to do the good recordings, if you only have a single AAA battery, your recorder might die in 7 or 8 hours. And then I've gone 17 hours in the winter with mine, and in the summertime I actually pulled off a full 24-hour plus recording and just walked up to it to take it off after leaving it there overnight. That's just, so mine's an Olympus. There's several models. I think I went to Circuit City to get mine. What you see here is a drop box that my friends at Texel Research, they put together a lot of these. And what it is, it's the digital recorder tucked inside one of these boxes with a hole drilled and an external microphone plugged in underneath, so that it's basically rain protection, and you can hang it on a tree branch as high as you'd like. Sometimes use bait like peanut butter or something to put out a scent, and maybe wipe it on the tree trunk, or just the recorder by itself has been effective as well. But you can hang it 7 feet in the air, away from a tree trunk, whatever you like. But it's a real handy way to put out recorders and just go back and get them. And you see the contents of another box. There's the small handheld recorder. Which, by the way, you can research just with the recorder. I've gotten the habit of walking with that just in my hand, and I've done some rather good recordings just when I'm out field researching with my friends, just holding that recorder firmly in my hand. So if something happens while we're on a night hike, you can capture everything. So when you come back and report in, because a lot of times your research is at night and you're not going to be able to get photographs or video anyway in the light conditions. So that's where audio really steps in at the night to give you something. Now here's an example. You can't see it, but this basically my first parabolic rig. It was a dish that I bought, and I had just rigged up an old broomstick and stuck it on a Christmas tree stand. It was kind of cheap, but it worked. And I took it out to a guy's property on the Sabine River, and he had a deer blind along this trail, and I just sat it on top of it, and actually slept in my truck across the train tracks that night. And when I got home and went over my overnight recording, I actually picked up something at 2 o'clock in the morning that sounded completely bipedal, walking towards the recorder, stopping like it saw it, and then it goes ahead and continues to walk right past it at 2 or 3 in the morning in a private property situation. I can only think that it's what we call a walk-up recording, where it doesn't sound like a four-legged animal like a deer, that I actually may have had a Bigfoot see my equipment pause and then walk on past it onto the gravel, which was merely maybe 20 yards from my vehicle where I was asleep. So I thought that was pretty good. These are some of my guys that I work with, because I work a lot with Texel Research as well as Mid-America, and he's got one of his parabolic dishes with a night-shot Sony video camera attached on top with an infrared spotlight and a white light spotlight, along with his, he's got this electronic bionic ear device that can boost the microphone sensitivity, and he'll position that around. And this was in East Texas location. Got a lot of activity, so I thought that might be kind of applicable for this topic, to show that you can basically customize this rig as far as you like. You can add your video to go with your audio. I personally would like to create some kind of audio device that will trigger a video camera instead of something that I can just turn on a passive type of video that will just start running when a certain decibel or something hits. That's what I'd like to work towards getting. This is a little more on the walk-up recordings like I described earlier. It's really a lot of fun. Now, sometimes you'll get stuff, you'll just get rustling and movement, and you won't be able to determine whether or not it is something, you know, that is upright like we walk, but you just have to keep at it. Sometimes you get some that are very pronounced that sound bipedal. And I believe I got a clip on here, but Texel recorded a rather unique and very impressive recording deep on the Neches Rivers on a private property that was inaccessible. I mean, completely, just full of snakes and amphibious vehicles required to get this island down the flood bottoms. And they put out a recorder and they put peanut butter on that tree 7 feet off the ground. And after I believe it was 2 o'clock in the morning, they had something walk up directly to it in the dark, straight to where the bait and recorder was, like it knew it was there. And as it's walking, you could hear it start coughing. It actually sounded like a person, but it had a deep rumbly cough like it was sick. And it actually proceeded to lick the peanut butter on the tree and then cough some more from licking the peanut butter. It's on their website. It's called a cough sequence. It's really something else. So I got some of it on here. I'm not sure how well it'll come through. We might turn the sound up. Let this play out. So that was rather unique, and it's a good one. I'd recommend checking out. They have more longer versions of that. That's the shortened clip, because they have about 20 minutes. worth of recordings. Now, this is a term you should hear most of the time. And if you're out doing this for Bigfoot research, you're just going to have to use the term unidentified vocalization for most of it. If you can't pass it off as a common owl call or a coyote and you think it's a maybe, it's best to just call it an unidentified, because you may not know all the other animals very well, some of the fox sounds and other birds. But it's just a terminology, because you shouldn't make definitive statements absolutely without a little more information. But and just be careful. A lot of people claim, and I don't disbelieve it at all, but about Bigfoot mimicking other animal sounds, because I completely believe that. But if you pick up what sounds like a regular animal sound on audio, I don't know that you can claim that it's, oh, that's Bigfoot doing an owl. I mean, to me, that's reaching, unless, as I think Jim's mentioned, he's heard one animal call turn into a different kind of animal call midway.
We were at a spot up by Ulaga Lake, and we heard a pigeon turn into an owl halfway through the call.
Yeah, so that's a little harder to explain. And then I'm not sure if we were joking or if there was a cough at the end of a, maybe we were joking.
No, we've actually heard coughs.
Okay, well, there you go. That would be a good time to have your recorder on, because some of the best stuff you'll ever experience is when you don't have your recorder with you. I can testify to that. That's the Bigfoot curse, the Bigfoot researcher curse. I was in Honabi a couple years ago camping out the day after everybody left from a big get-together, and turns out that night I awoke to some mumbling talk outside of my tent that just had my eyes bugged out of my head. I woke up to it, and of course I had planned on putting my recorder right by my tent because of that situation being possible. But instead, I had left it. I only had one recorder with me, and I decided to do my dish down the road, where we did catch a whoop that Jim did his manual whoop, and I recorded return whoop earlier in the evening. But I didn't bring my recorder back and set it by the tent when we turned in. So basically, I experienced something that I could only say what happened, and I didn't have any evidence. Although later, my friend Dave here, that I found on this the YouTube channel, Bigfoot Field Guide TV, 2 years earlier had a outing at the same location before I knew him, and he was describing the sounds around the tent at night in the same area, and he described this mumbling talk, and he did an imitation of it, and it was a year before I met him and 2 years before my incident, and he exactly replicated what I heard. So to me, that justified everything. But if I could do it over again, I would have had another recorder on. Which, by the way, when I stopped snoring when I woke up, it stopped. I heard it. It woke me up. It quit talking when I quit snoring, and I sat there in silence trying to listen, because I knew it wasn't more than maybe 10 feet away or less, and ended up thinking about bursting out the tent, but it would take so much noise to even move and unzip it. I just stayed there quiet, listening as hard as I could, and it was dead silent. And it was like a standoff of who was going to be quieter, it or me. And I ended up hearing it backpedal off and heard the rock shifting on the ground when it stepped back. So it reassured myself that there was something outside. But once again, no recorder. That's it. That should be louder than that, but let me do that again. This is a recording from 2009 that we did on the Trinity River, and I clipped out the part where we're talking before that because there's some audio on it. I was with a couple friends of mine, but we had been researching the same area on land just a week and a half earlier and heard a strange vocalization that was really quite loud and odd. It sounds sort of like a pig screaming, but it wasn't like regular hog sounds. Now granted, there are a lot of hogs in this location and coyotes, but also Bigfoot sightings. And that was a night that stuff happened to us and we didn't have any equipment. It was the first time we went to that spot together and just hung out. And we ended up hearing things around us. We heard wood knocks. We heard this strange scream at least 3 or 4 times in different directions. So it wasn't a one-off thing. It was the exact same pattern of a vocalization as we recorded later on the river, which was kind of on the river behind the land where we were at. But that night that we were there with no equipment, no recorder, our night ended after we'd heard sporadic movement and we had some kind of low rumbling growl coming at us that ran us off from behind the brush by us at midnight. So there ended up being basically what we call a Class B Bigfoot encounter. It wasn't a canine growl. It was a very low, just constant rumbling coming from a direction. And my buddy was an experienced researcher that had sightings, and he was very wound up and ready to get out of there. And I was just thinking, hey, that's cool. You hear that? Yeah. Oh, wow. And then he was ready to go. So I was like, okay, let's go. I would have probably stayed a few more minutes. Not sure how that would have worked out for us. Play it again here. Now see, to me it still sounds like a pig-like sound, but Texel's analyzed that, and we've had basically, it has like a little pause in it midway through it, and it was exactly the same when we heard it the week earlier. So it wasn't like a one-off thing. We were wondering if it was a pig being killed, or maybe it's a really giant hog that just does that, but it carries the note, and it had a spectral analysis that was similar to a female's human scream. And now, even just the other day, I was reading about a Michigan researcher describing Bigfoot activity in Michigan, and they were describing Bigfoot in this news article, and described it having a pig-like scream. And I just thought that was interesting because that's the way I kind of describe this. Here, I'll get a few more other files. This is... Before I go back to the other one, that's the beginning. We actually had a recording that Texel recorded in Louisiana, and they've used it as a call blasting recording. And what we were doing was taking this Louisiana recording and call blasting it in my research area in the Trinity River I guess it was last May, in a campground. And it's adjacent to an area full of sightings. It's wildlife management and so forth. There's tens of thousands of acres there of uninhabitable wooded, flood areas full of snakes. Let me do that again. Basically what you're going to hear is the two call blasts, and then there's about a 30-second wait, and we start getting responses, and more than one creature responding. Now one of them, after a few responds, starts to sound more like a coyote, but one of the responders, they basically start going off at one another for 2 or 3 minutes, and one of them mimics the call exactly. So I feel like there's, I can't say 100%, but I feel like we do have Bigfoot responses from that call. especially, but also I didn't put it on here, but 45 minutes after we heard all the responses, and the close-up, the first two that were going back and forth to one another, were very close to it, to our north. And 45 minutes later, we were just standing around, just me and everybody else was asleep. We heard something. We don't know what we heard, but we heard the sound of movement. We're thinking, you know, like as if a herd of deer ran through the woods near us. But there was a field across where we were at in this campsite. Well, it was a really odd sound. It sounded like a stampede, and we couldn't see anything, but there was enough starlight, and we were looking, and we're like, where's this sound coming from? It was moving from our left to our right, sweeping across, and it was just really bizarre. And we, you know, it kind of spooked us a little bit, and didn't really know. He did hear one deer blow, while, you know, like maybe there were deer running through the woods. But when I went back and listened to the recording, when I pulled this recording off, right before the sound of all that movement, it's the sound of something that sounds like a gorilla grunt. That we didn't actually hear that when we just heard what followed it. But in that recording, you hear just a, oh, you know, but it was bellowy and deep, and it sounded like a gorilla. That's all I can say. From about 6 years ago, and it's in a location only maybe 5 or 10 miles away from where that last one was done. So I just wanted to play that.